So we're now on the top of Daf Tesvav Omid Beis. The Brisa says, the Mishnah says in Machshir, Matzaba, they found a child mushla. You know, what's it called? The bamboo cradle. You know what I'm talking about. In any event, in the city, they found an abandoned child. The city is made up of two elements of population: the Jews and the non-Jews. And they find this tinok mushlach, an abandoned child that was put away somewhere in the city. We have no idea if this tinok is a Jewish child or a non-Jewish child. So the din is imrov ovdei kochavim. If most of the members of that city are goyim, oved kochavim, we establish that this child, this unidentified child, is also a goy. In Rov Yisrael, if most of the members of the city are Jews, then the Tinok is Yisrael. Mechzal Mechta, 50-50, Yisrael. Then we judge the child as a Yisrael. Omar Rav, what does that mean as a Yisrael? For what dinim? Lo shano elalach yosa. Right, there's halach that Bezdin are obligated to sustain the aniyei ha'ir, the poor people of the city. And what he has here a note in which he says, Mechzal Mechza ein din lefarnasa. Just 1 second. Do you have that in your notes? He's basing himself on a Tosfos, and he says that b'mechzal mechza ein din lefarnasa. What does that mean? Let's see if I can find the Tosfos here. Maskal im. So again, I don't know what that line means. You know, I'm not mechuyev to explain every single line in the Sifta, but the simple pshat elach yoso means that Bezdin has to be mefarnes this person, this tinok, as if he was one of the aniyim in the city. And we're not going to say, well, hamotz mechavel of haraya, you prove it. It's mechzal mechzal. No, we're going to go lechum elach yoso. Aval yuchsim lo. We're not going to consider him a Yisrael, fiyuchsin. Like, let's say, for example, the child is a female, she's asura l'kohen. But the Gemara is assuming now that in the statement of Rav, we're not going to apply Rov Ha'ir Yisrael as far as Yuchsin is concerned. Even though Kolator Kula, we rely on Rov, but here in Yuchsin, we're not going to rely on Rov. We're going to need Trey Ruby. Ushmul Amar, Shmuel says that when it says Rov Ha'ir are Jews, we assume that this Tinok is a Jew. That's Lefakech all of us Agal. That means to be Mechal Shabbos to save him. So the Gemara is going to reinterpret Shmuel. You can't explain Shmuel literally because we don't need a rov in order to be Mechal Shabbos. Okay. So we see clearly from Rav that as far as Yuchsin is concerned, we need Trey Rubin. We're not going to be sewing on one row. So how could Rav Paskin Halachic Rabbi Yossi, who is Machsha Lakuna, even with one single row? This is the Kasha Rabbi Yirmiyah. The Gemara answers Ishtamita say, but Rabbi Yirmiyah was unaware of Hadiyama Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Shebikir Kronos Shel Tzipori Avi Mais. That the story of the Tinokes that was raped was a case with a Trey Reuben. And when Rabbi Yossi was Machshav B'Tinokes, that's Tafka, because on that moment in time there were Shayoras that are going by and he had Trey Reuben. When Rabbi Yossi said that Tinokes is Ksher L'Kuhuna, Rav says Haloch Rabbi Yossi, because we're talking about a case of Trey Reuben. But as far as Yuchsin is concerned, we don't rely on one single row. Rav Chanan Barova, the Omar Rosh Shahoisa. So Rabbi Yossi was only Machshir. Betray Ruby only because of a Rosh Shah. But for all generations, we don't require Trey Ruby. Is Kasha Ha? How do we understand Rav in the Mishnah in Machshirin about Tinok Mushlach, that as far as Yuchsin is concerned, we need Trey Ruby. And we're not going to rely on one row. And yet Rav Chanan Barav is saying in the name of Rav that Lidoros, you don't need Trey Ruby. And the Gemara answers, Madamasi Holovasti Ha. When we had this transmission of Rav, that it's a Rosh Shah, that's not with regard to the Maisa of the Tinokos and the Kronos Shel Tzipori where there were Trey Ruby. The Maisa happened and there was only one row, but there was a Rosh Shah that we could rely on one row. But as far as Doris is concerned, we need Trey Ruby. And that fits beautifully in what we said in Rav on the Mishnah, that if you find a Tinok Mushlach, the Yuchsin, we're not going to rely on row. Gufa, Matzah, Tinok, he finds in this mixed city, Jews and non-Jews, a Tinok Mushlach, Berchova Ir. The Ein Yodua, we don't know if this Tinok is Jew or non-Jew. In Rov Ovikachav, in Rov Yisrael, Mechza, Yisrael. The Omar Rav Lo Shanu. When do we rely on Rov? If most of the members of the city are Ksherim, the Tinok gets a din of Yisrael with Rov El Achyosa, that Bezin is going to be Mitzuva Lefarnasa, like all the other poor people in the city. Aval Yuchsin, lo. We're not going to establish Liyuchsin that he's Israel. And if it's a female child, she'll be Asur L'Kohen. And that despite the fact that there's Rov Yisrael. In Kol Tarkulu, we rely on Rov. But Linyan Yuchsin, when they were Machmer, and they required Trey Rub. Ushmuel Omer L'Fakeach Me'olavis Hagal. That when we need Rov Ha'ir Yisrael, in order to judge and define the child as Jewish, that's in order to allow us to be Mfakech Olavis Hagal. To violate Shabbos for the sake of this child. And it comes out that in Mechza, Shmuel is saying that we will not violate the Shabbos. Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi, V'Amar Rav Yosef, V'Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Ein Holchem B'Pikuach Nefesh Acharo. when there's a tzad to exempt him, and to allow to violate Shabbos, even for mute, we're going to violate the Shabbos. So Mefakas Hagal applies even if there's only a mute, a minority of Jews. Because ain't a holchim bikuach nefesh achar rov. So how could Shmuel say that Rov Yisrael, he has a din of Yisrael, to violate the Shabbos, even if he was a miyat Yisrael, that would be the din. Shmuel was commenting on the Reisha. What does it say in the Reisha? In Rov Oved Kochavim, Oved Kochavim. If most are goyim, then the tinok is considered a goy. And on that, Omer Shmuel, Fakech all of us a gal ain't okay. What does that mean? Ain't okay? We're not going to say that since Rov of the Kochavim, we're going to treat this child and define it as an akum. But rather, even though Rov Ha'ir or akum, we're going to be Fakech all of us a gal. We're going to violate the Shabbos because ain't holchem bikuach nefesh acharo. Now we go back to the Reish. It says in Rova Ovdei Kochavim Kovdei Kochavim L'mayilchas. We just finished saying that to be Mechal Shabbos, even if there's Rova Akum, we will be Mechal Shabbos Ki Yisrael. So where will we have to? What conclusion do we have to derive from Rov Kovdei Kochavim Kovdei Kochavim? In what sense is it Rov? Omar Papala Chila Nevelas. Right? There's an Isur of Siyu, the Sapos will be a Dayim, but in this case, if he was an Akum, you're allowed to feed him the Velas. And at what point does it become also to feed him nevela? That's only after Gerus. He'll have to undergo Gerus. The Mishnah says in Rov Yisrael, L'may Hilchasa. I mean, after all, already on Mechzal we said he's Yisrael. So what did you add here? Rov Yisrael. Amar Papa, Lahachse lo Aveda. The Torah says, make sure you know who lost it before you return it. And now you have a Rov Ha'ir Yisrael. For sure, you chayav to be Machse lo Avedosa. Mechzal. Yisrael. So we have a city that's 50-50, and the child is given the status of Yisrael. You can't tell me Lachselo Aveda because Lachselo Aveda would only apply if there's Rov Yisrael. Now, if a Shar Shal Yisrael is Mazik, a Shar Shal Goy, he's potter. If a Shar Shal Akum is Mazik and Shar Shal Yisrael, he pays Nezek Shalom, even if he's a Shar Dam. So now we're going to explain Mechzal Yisrael. Hechidami, what is the case? If the Shar Shal Yisrael is Nogeach, a Shar Shal Akum, so the Shar Shal Yisrael is the Shar Shal, so Tinok Shenishlach Beir, and Yesh Bo Mechza, and the Mishnah is saying that we give him the status of Yisrael. Let's say Ruvain's shor was nogeach the tinok, we'll call him Shimon's shor. And we're going to obligate Ruvain to pay damages under the assumption that Shimon, this tinok, is Yisrael. And what happened to Hamotzi Mechaver of Araya? Right, the Nizak is claiming I'm a Jew, and therefore you have to pay me. The Masechet is saying, no, maybe you're a guy. And since it's a Mechzal Mechzal, then it's the child would have the burden of proof to establish that he's Yisrael. Lemalei, I see Raya, Yisrael Atuchko. So Ruvain, the Tovea, Ruvain, the Nitba, is going to say, you prove that you're Yisrael before I have to pay you. Lo tzricha, the Nakri Torah Didei, the Torah Didan, that the child's shor was no geach a shor of a goy. The Mishnah says that we're going to treat the shor of the tinok as if he were Yisrael. Palga mishalim, he has to pay half of the nezek, because that's the din of a shor tam of Yisrael. But the idach palga, but what about the other half? Omalahu, the tinok has a right to say to Yisrael, I see right to love Yisrael, and vetein lachon. If I'm a Jew, then I only have to pay you nezek shalom. I only have to pay you chatzi nezek. I don't have to pay you nezek shalom. So you're going to come back and say, well, you are a guy. And if you're a guy, then you have to pay nezek shalom. Let's go over the last Gemara again. Omalahu, I see raya to lav Yisrael ano ve'etein lechon. You're the tovea because you're the niza, and you're claiming that I'm a guy and I have to pay you the other half as well because a guy shoshel guy shenok shosh Yisrael pays nezek shalom. But the burden of proof is on your shoulders to prove that I'm a guy and force me to pay because 50-50 chance that I'm a Yisrael and I don't have to pay more than a shor tam, which is chatzi nezek. Adjonalecha besula nises. The Mishnah at the beginning of the second parak, Isha shen is armala, Oshen is garsha. So she's demanding the ksuba from her husband after he divorced her, or from the Yarshim after he died. He omers besula nesasani. My ksuba was a ksubas masayim, but who omer lo kiel almona nesatich. I married you as a second marriage, and I was only mischayiv to pay almona. So what's the din in this case? If she can prove that she was a basula at the time of this marriage. And has she proved that she was a basula at the time of the marriage of the first marriage? Behi numa, that she went from the house of her father to the house of the chasidus with this kind of a covering over her head, made of hadas agula, some sort of a round, like a keter, almost made up of hadasim. The rosha parua, or alternatively, her hair was, flowing over her shoulders. That's the minhag of Nisue Basulos. So this would be testimony that she was a Basula, and therefore Ksubasa was signed. So again, I think this is an application of the general principle of she wants to be Motzi Masayim. He's saying, I married you already a second marriage. I only want to pay you a money. Now the burden of proof is on her. And she can prove with Aiden that she was Yotzes Binuma or Roshel Paru. Rabbi Yochanan ben broke Omer, Af Chiluk Kloyos Raya. I have another simon that she was a first marriage. So what they used to do is they used to divvy up candies, and Kloyos are like, Shibolim, Mitukim, and they gave that out to the children, probably similar to throwing the candies that we have today. And in Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka's local shtat, that was the miniget Nesui Besulos. Umoder Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Gamliel. Now we're going back to the original machlokes back on Daf Yud Beis between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Is she believed to be Tovas, her ksuba? Umoder Rabbi Yossi be Omer Chaver Sadazu Shalavicha Hoisa Ulakachtia Mimenu. Shoneman. This sada that I'm living in, I'm working the sada, really belonged to your father, but I bought it from you. Now, the very moment that he admits it belonged to this other guy's father, then the one to whom he confessed, the one about whom he confesses, becomes the muksa. And yet now he says lakachtia, and I paid it, full price for it, so it's mine. Then we should say I'm Raya. But no, he's Neman. And this has to do with a concept called a Pesha Asa or a Pesha Yitir, which you'll see on the top of Daf Zion. Nobody knew that this karka ever belonged. Let's say Reuven admits this karka belonged to Shimon's father. Nobody ever knew that. There was no proof that Shimon inherited from his father, that his father was the Marakama. So this guy Reuven, so to speak, puts his foot in his mouth, and he's a Pesha Asa, and he says, no, this was your father. I have to admit, this was your father's field. Now we believe it when he says what I bought it from. That's called a Pesha Hit. The Yesh Edim Shishel Aviv, if on the other hand there were witnesses that testify that this field once belonged to, we'll call him Yaakov, Shimon's father, and this guy Reuven, who's squatting on the land, is saying I bought it from him, Eino Neman, he's not believed, he doesn't have any shtar or edus to prove that he bought the field. And this leads us to the Gemara here on Daf Tezayin, which Amir Hashem will take a look at on Yom Shlishi. And then have a great day.